I think it's time we need to start right now, Dieter. So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to webinar 4 of the Star IDAZ Innovation Academy. Thank you for joining us. My name is Latifa Al-Hashimi. I'm based at Created in Belgium, and I'm part of Star IDAZ Secretariat. Happy to continue this Star IDAZ webinar series, supporting innovation stewardship in the global animal health research community. Just a quick reminder of our previous Innovation Academy webinars. We started with the first webinar with Gary Entricon on the value of Star IDAZ roadmaps to stimulate collaboration and maximize research impact. The second webinar was with my colleague Johanna Charlier on using discount tools to identify priority areas with high need for innovation. And the third webinar, we had it with Sven Arnott on facilitating the path from discovery to innovation in animal health. Today, we are pleased to welcome our fourth webinar with our fourth speaker, Dr. Dieter van Krenest. And I'm happy and pleased to introduce Dr. Dieter, which is a veterinarian with over 20 years of experience in the animal health industry. Before Dieter served as external innovation lead Europe at Zoetis, and currently he is the poultry lead in the Zoetis Global Portfolio Marketing Team. Dieter holds a PhD in veterinary science and a veterinary medicine degree from Ghent University, and he is well known for bridging veterinary expertise with innovation, strategy, and global product development. Today, as I said, the topic is on external contribution to large animal health companies' research and developments. And Dieter's presentation will last approximately 40 minutes. We'll have a Q&A session with that will follow the presentation, about 15 minutes will allow to this. And I taken the opportunity to ask you, please type your questions at any time in the Q&A window, and we will address them after the talk. And please note that this webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be published and disseminated through Star IDAZ channels, so you will be able to rewatch it or share it with your colleagues. Dieter, thank you for accepting our invitation, and it's over to you. You can share your slides, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Latifa, for the introduction. I just hit share. Can you see the title slide, Latifa?
Yeah, I see it very well.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you. Well, and thank you for the invitation to cover this topic with you today. Thanks for those who joined. I hope I will be able to meet the expectations here. Slight change in the title. I changed it to the role of external innovation in large animal health company. I know the original topic specified R&D, but as I was building the slides, I realized that external innovation touches on a little bit more than R&D, although it is mostly R&D focused. Just a disclaimer to start. Well, it has been mentioned, but I am a Zoetis employee. So some of my talk will be biased towards how we do things at Zoetis, although I tried to incorporate more general ways of working based on discussions with other animal health companies and colleagues from other companies. I was indeed the external innovation lead for Europe until late 2025, but I actually changed roles. So I'm currently in a global marketing role. I am a poultry guy by background, first and foremost. So I'm now the poultry lead in global portfolio management. But I was indeed active in external innovation for a while. So I hope I'll be able to address your questions at the end. If not, I will direct you to some other people whom might have the answer. And as mentioned, I am indeed a vet by training, and then after doing my PhD, rolled into animal health. Just a word about Zoetis, not necessarily as a just to publicize about the company, but first and foremost to put things into perspective so that you know who Zoetis is, what the size is also, because the way external innovation is organized in an animal health company will depend on the company's size. As you may guess, smaller companies usually have roles which wear several hats, and as the company gets larger, roles get more and more specialized. So what I'm saying today is applying to Zoetis and other large animal health companies, but in smaller companies, things may look a bit differently. So Zoetis, well, it's the largest animal health company today. I'll start here with the bottom right corner. There's close to 14,000 colleagues in Zoetis currently, so that's quite a big company in the meantime. Another number which is relevant here is the lower left corner. There's about 1,600 R&D colleagues, so slightly over 10% of our contingent works in R&D. And they do that covering all these therapeutic areas here on the left. I don't know if you see my cursor moving, but we provide medicine, so more the classic pharmaceutical products, vaccines, diagnostics, biodevices, genetic tests, and are also active in precision animal health. So a very large portfolio covering 8 core species here, top right corner. Essentially all the emotionally and economically relevant animal species, leading to a revenue of slightly over $9 billion. These are 2024 numbers. It will have grown in the meantime. Zoetis is a fairly new company. The IPO dates back to 2013. So this is our 13th year of existence. But we like to emphasize that we draw on 70 years of experience because Zoetis, as some of you on the phone may know, spun out of Pfizer. It was actually the former Pfizer Animal Health division, which was brought to the New York Stock Exchange as an independent company. And Pfizer on its own also was built from various legacy companies, all, well, actually going back to about 70 years ago. So keep that in mind as I progress. It's a large company, so a fairly large external innovation team as well, which is specialized. And again, it will not be the same in all other companies. Topics to cover today. I've split up the presentation in 5 buckets. First, going in general into what external innovation is, what it means, also what it doesn't mean for us. Then I'd like to spend some time on the mapping and scouting tools that are used by an external innovation team, not necessarily the Zoetis team, but more in general, because this might be relevant for startups, for example, for you to understand how you get on the radar of an external innovation team. Small word also on research alliances and strategic alliances. A bit more on how to engage with us or with any other animal health companies. Some do's and don'ts that I've seen happening over the past few years. And then briefly, some results in action. I had to be brief about the results because, as you can imagine, a lot of what I'm sitting on as information is confidential. So as I was building these slides, I was pretty limited in what I could share, especially when it pertained to very specific collaborations. So first, what is external innovation? Well, it's actually pretty simple. It's any external contribution to an R&D pipeline. I focused on R&D again here because that is mostly what external innovation does. There are a couple of other topics that they touch on as well, but it's 90% plus R&D focused. And this can be from very fundamental, very large contributions to R&D projects to baby steps, to incremental steps. And when I say fundamental, then I'm thinking about things such as new chemical entities or new molecules, which are being scouted and then in-licensed by external innovation, which obviously is at the core of an R&D program. Vaccine candidates, similar story. That is all pretty fundamental. But then as you go down in the list, I tried to, let's say, go from very big impact to smaller impact from top to bottom. So sometimes it's about a potency assay, for example. You're working on a vaccine program. You're in trouble with your potency assay, and then it's up to the external innovation team to try and find a partner who could solve this. I'm not downplaying the role of potency assays. Every step here in this list is important, but as you can imagine, for example, just to throw out something, a new isoxazoline compound is more fundamental than the smaller enablers in an R&D program. Usually what external innovation is focusing on is very tangible, material, I mean. So actual assets, the things listed above, chemical entities, molecules, vaccine candidates, the like, but it's also about expertise. An external innovation team, I'll get back to that later on, but is one of the main eyes and ears towards the external environment to get to know key opinion leaders, to find expertise. One thing here in my list above disease models, for example, that is expertise really, where either you use a disease model at a CRO or you try to negotiate with a CRO to potentially internalize the disease model in your own R&D program. And we often get questions about what stage do you look for, or what stage should I start interacting with you as an animal health company? And there it's very broad, at least in the Zoetis definition. We would be interested in anything from early stage research to products in development. I must say, earlier stage is what we usually see. It is rare for us to see products which have advanced far in development, because usually that is where the big investments are needed. Development trials are costly. And that's usually where startups or institutes do not have the financial means to do that. So usually we see early stage research, but we're not saying no to products later in the developmental pipeline. This also touches on this topic, that is the distinction between external innovation and business development. And this might be a bit Zoetis-centric. We really draw a line between external innovation and business development at launch of a product. And I'll clarify. External innovation for us helps feed the R&D pipeline. Business development helps feed the commercial product portfolio. So essentially, the line is drawn once a product is on the market with actual sales. This would be something that the business development team focuses on. Could be a product, could be an entire company in an acquisition discussion. External innovation really works more upstream in that R&D pipeline piece. But I've drawn these arrows here on this slide because, as you can imagine, these are teams which are traveling around. They hear a lot of things, so external innovation will always also pick up interesting commercial opportunities. We'll pass them over to business development, vice versa. If business development hears about interesting R&D opportunities, they would pass it over to external innovation. And you see there's an overlap here between my circles, and that's first of all, because we work very closely together, but also because you will always have instances where both teams are engaging at the same time. An example which is easy to understand would be, for example, an acquisition of a company with products on the market, but also with an R&D pipeline. So that company, the products on the market would definitely be valued, and the transaction would be led by business development. But then when it comes to the R&D pipeline, external innovation would be looking at that as well to understand what the value of that pipeline could be for the acquiring company. And just to visualize this in a slightly different way, so research and development is mostly external innovation supported with all the things that I mentioned previously, entering into research or development, both the material things and the expertise. And then once, like I said, this line is drawn, you're looking at on-market products, then you're looking at business development deals. And I've mentioned products a lot and acquisitions, but things like supply agreements, distribution agreements also would fit under business development, at least in our setup, but I believe the same would be true for a lot of other companies. Now, what external innovation does and how they work in animal health, well, I'm saying here, I cannot speak for all animal health companies, but I try to generalize a bit. EI teams, external innovation teams, will usually consist of a diverse mix of professional profiles. As an example, in Zoetis, the external innovation team is a team of about 10 people. I think there's 2 or 3 vets in the team currently. There's pharmaceutical scientists, there's IP specialists, and there's people who are specializing in things such as artificial intelligence and the impact on R&D and so on. So it's mostly a heavy science background that you will find in these teams, with some additional flavor, some additional specific expertise, like I mentioned, IP or AI, or in my case, it was more the link with the actual business. Important, I think, for you to understand is that external innovation teams are not alone in defining which opportunities to pursue. I would even dare to go a step further and say external innovation teams do not define which opportunities to pursue at all. Usually, we get what I would call a shopping list from various stakeholders in the company, asking us, hey, if you would come across something like this, we need this, we would be interested. So there's a heavy involvement of research and development. Research and development is flagging the gaps, is flagging the needs that they have. There's also heavy involvement of marketing, strategic marketing, saying, hey, if we would find a product covering this disease or that indication, that would really be a valuable addition to our portfolio. I said, well, EI is really walking around with the shopping list. That feels a bit passive almost. They will be involved in defining which opportunities to pursue, but remember that they are not the ones defining this alone. So keep that in mind when engaging with them. Another important one, external innovation teams will not be the only decision makers in deciding which opportunities to accept or to decline. And again, I would even go a step further and say they're probably not taking the decision at all. There's a very heavy involvement of subject matter experts that you, as from an external standpoint, will usually not see. But internally, I've mentioned there's 1,600 R&D colleagues who will be turning every opportunity inside out, and we cannot be subject matter experts in everything with a large portfolio such as ours. So we heavily rely on their decision, their judgment, when we say yes or no to a certain opportunity. What external innovation does do is taking the whole process from scouting to agreement. So the first interactions, the continuing interactions from setting up an NDA to maybe going to a research collaboration agreement. That is all external innovation. Once that is done, and some of you on the line may have experienced that, external innovation tends to take a backseat for a while, and the main stakeholder usually becomes R&D as the asset is progressing through the pipeline. External innovation will remain involved, but will take a rather light touch, just remaining updated about the progress, but not much more. So also maybe interesting from a startup standpoint, for example, your points of contact will suddenly shift as you progress and as your asset actually gets into that R&D pipeline. A word on the mapping and scouting tools used by external innovation teams. That's actually quite diverse. A lot of what is on this slide is not rocket science. I mean, using personal and professional networks, I think that speaks for itself. All of us have been in this industry for a while, know a lot of people, know who to speak to. I'll spend a bit more time on partnering events because that is pretty specific for this role. Interesting, I think, to know from your standpoint as well, what we do there and how it works. We sometimes do deep dives and open innovation challenges, although I must say that is not that common for us, but there are platforms allowing for that, where you write out an innovation challenge and then various institutes, research institutes, universities can participate. This is one area where I cannot really disclose which ones we use specifically, but if you're interested in this and you would do a Google, you would find some of these companies who are facilitating this. There's a possibility to use specialized search consultants. Again, not very common in our case, but that's maybe because of our size. Venture capital is an interesting source of information as well. Investment funds of all sorts, whether they are in the much more risky area of the real venture capital, or a bit later in a developmental pipeline, they are interesting sources of information for us as well. Investment banks, for example, too, they sometimes just come to us and say, hey, I have this asset, would you be interested? And then a more continuous thing is the patent publication search, general competitive intelligence, and there's plenty of databases for that as well, many of which will be known to you. But I said I wanted to just touch a little bit more on the partnering events. Some of you may have attended some of these. If not, I would definitely recommend them to you. I'd like to pick on a few in specific. The 5 most interesting ones for me on this slide would be Bio, for example. Bio is a massive convention. There's Bio International in the US. There's Bio Europe on the European side. I think there's even an Asian leg of Bio now. Massive events. I think the US event is counting up to 20,000 delegates, all from biotech, startup, very human health focused, I must confess. But as you may guess, a lot of the human breakthroughs serve as very interesting substrate for animal health as well. Usually what we see happening in human health will get some kind of veterinary component 20 to 30 years down the road. So very interesting. As an example, and just as an anecdote, when going to Bio Europe post-COVID, we suddenly saw a surge in companies with mRNA vaccine technologies, with lipid nanoparticle technologies, all interesting for us because they were enabling a reduction of cost of goods of mRNA vaccines. Just to throw that out as an example of a human health thing translated into animal health. Another big one here, the Animal Health, Nutrition and Technology Innovation event takes place in London every year. I think there's a US leg for that one as well, if I'm not mistaken. But I was Europe focused, so I mainly know the London event. As it says, completely animal health focused. So in contrast to bio, you find more dedicated animal health companies there. Definitely an interesting one. Same goes for Animal AgTech here, which usually takes place in Amsterdam every year. Maybe slightly more production focused, not so much health focused, but an interesting one as well. BioFit is the fourth one that I would like to call out. That's an interesting one in France. Again, human, but also a veterinary leg to it. Interesting because it draws on a very different audience than the three that I mentioned before. And then last but not least, I need to make some, advertise a little bit for the DIA conference because I'm involved there in the advisory committee. That's a conference which will take place in Bruges this year in May. Go to the website there. Very interesting one as well, completely animal health focused, slightly more upstream, slightly more early stage perhaps than the other ones on the screen. And I think I saw Sven Arnouds also here on the screen dialing in. Sven is the engine behind this one, and many of you will know Sven, so you can reach out to him in case of interest. So all very interesting partnering events where you will usually have things like plenary sessions where there will be talks and presentations. But what is, to me at least, the most interesting is the speed dating sessions, which I will get back to later on. So essentially one-on-ones between startups and animal health companies or whatever you want to set up, where in about 30 minutes you can discuss face-to-face. Small word on research alliances and strategic alliances. Much of what I was doing in the past was very asset focused or product focused almost. But external innovation also tends to get involved in more broad alliances. And I'll just call out two here as an example. Strategic partnership that we have with the EBRC. That is one where, we essentially sit around the table, discuss what is of strategic importance for Zoetis, and try to find a common ground essentially between us as a company and then the research institutes. Based on their expertise and their interests, they are working out projects which both the parties could benefit from. And then another one here is VHive. VHive is a strategic alliance between Zoetis and the university and Surrey, which is very data focused. Data-driven collaborative research, lots of digital expertise sitting there in Surrey. And then additionally, there's the VHive Animal Health Incubator, which was launched recently, which is supporting early stage startups and entrepreneurs by providing access to resources, training and expertise, including Zoetis expertise. When I was discussing the partnering events, I promised to get back to the speed dating sessions that will be part of my fourth chapter here, the how to engage, the do's and don'ts. This is where I'll try to spice it up a little with anecdotes to make it clear what to do, what not to do. And to start off with the partnering events, well, maybe first for people who think this is a very glamorous life, the top right corner shows you a picture of one such partnering event. That was the recent Bio Europe. Essentially, rows and rows and rows of cubicles, all with a little curtain, and you dive into these cubicles for a quick one-on-one. Lots of suits, lots of black suits. Maybe one tip, if you want to stand out, wear something colorful. Those people usually stick in the mind a little bit better. But jokes aside, so these are these speed dating sessions. Now, how these work? These partnering events will always have a partnering platform, as we call it. So essentially a software tool which opens up once you sign up for the event. And on that partnering portal, one advice from me to you would be to start screening for companies that you're interested in meeting pretty early. Agendas fill up quickly. One mistake, I mean, I hope nobody makes this mistake anymore, but one mistake would be going to partnering events and thinking, okay, I will be able to schedule my meetings there on the spot. That will not fly. That will not happen. In our case, for example, we usually get invites from essentially from the moment the portal opens, but let's say from 4 weeks before the event, reaching a peak to about 2 weeks before the event. We get, I think for the recent Bio Europe, we had close to, we probably had more than 100 companies reaching out to us. We filter with 2 or 3 people attending the event. We have dedicated working sessions. Filter what we think is interesting, filter out what we think is not interesting, start accepting, and our agendas fill up fairly quickly. I was in Bio Europe with one colleague in the latest edition. We managed to see 44 companies in 2 days or in 2.5 days. That makes your head spin, I can assure. So that also will link to something that I'll mention in a second. But as you can imagine, once we're at 44, it's full, it's done. So we always have companies reaching out in the last week where we simply have to say, sorry, we do not have availability anymore. Sometimes when we can tell based on simply what they've sent us that it would be super pity to not see them, then we'll schedule something separately. But often, this gets lost a bit. Use the opportunity to meet face to face if you can, and do that by engaging early. And then I mentioned, so 100 plus invites to be handled by 2 people on top of the day-to-day work, I would say. So be clear in your invitation. We sometimes get invitations which are cryptic. Things like, it would be great to speak at the event. And then essentially what these companies are doing, they put the work on us to start looking at their websites, to maybe look at their product portfolio. If time allows, we would do that. We're not afraid of working, but often time doesn't allow to do that. So be specific, be clear, tell us which technology you want to discuss, because a company name alone could mean a lot of things. Some companies have very broad portfolios. Maybe there's only one specific thing you want to discuss. Be specific. If possible, already add something around what you're currently sitting on in terms of data package. For example, dear Zoetis, we've been working on, we're pretty big in osteoarthritis, so people engage with us on osteoarthritis. They would, for example, say we're working on an osteoarthritis product for dogs. Okay, that's interesting, but it would be even better if you'd say, I'm working on an osteoarthritis product for dogs, which currently has been tested in a rat model and has shown some preliminary safety data in dogs. Whatever you have, but try to be specific so that we understand how is this different compared to what we have internally. Is it valuable to engage? Also try to mention what you're looking for. Are you after a research collaboration? Do you want to get rid of an asset? The sooner the better. things like that also help us in preparing the actual one-on-one meeting. We try to come prepared with a list of questions. The more specific you are, the more specific we can make up our questions. So that's for the speed dating piece. A very important one, by the way. I mean, I cannot emphasize enough how much we get out of these events. Obviously, another very important one is just using your, when I say your, as an institute or in a startup, use your network. Use people you know, who may know whom to target in a company. Use your advocates. It's always very valuable for us if somebody that we know and trust tells us, hey, company X is working on this. I think it looks great. I think you should have a look. This almost always gets some kind of additional credibility label for us, which makes it float higher in the ranking. If you struggle with the network, well, there's LinkedIn. If you search on external innovation as keywords, or partnering or the like, or even business development, you will usually find profiles in the company that you want to target. When I was in external innovation, I got a lot of requests from people who simply found me on LinkedIn based on the name of my role. And often I had to tell them, hey, I'm not the guy, but I know the lady or the guy that you need, and I'll make sure you get in touch. So use that as well. And then, well, I already mentioned this, personal recommendations go a long way, especially if it's coming from people that we know from past interactions. Another way of interacting is the partnering portal of the company you want to approach. We have one, it's on the screen here, where you can submit your partnership proposal. And we even have these links here and the QR code also, which takes you to these links, where we list out what we are looking for, the gaps, the things that we need. I didn't check for all animal health companies. I checked a couple, and well, the ones I checked also have a partnering portal. So that is definitely something for you to use. Smaller animal health companies may not have this, and then you can revert back to my previous options. But the interesting piece about the partnering portal is that you get to see, well, what we're looking for. As an example, and this is something I can publicly state, we are not in the ingredient business. We are not in the feed ingredient business. So if you're working on something like a fatty acid to incorporate in feed, or an organic acid to incorporate in feed, we would not be your partner. So that's already some effort you can skip. And then the promised do's when engaging. So I'm a bit repetitive here, but be crisp, clear, and concise. Remember, sometimes up to 100 or more invites. The clearer you can be, the better it is, but remain concise at the same time. Remember, we are not the subject matter experts. I mentioned things like you can state the model, you can state this or that, but don't drown us, I'd say, in scientific data yet. We are the first filter. If the first filter passes, then you will have opportunity to show all of the data you have to the subject matter expert, but don't do that immediately. Another piece of advice is to seek early advice and input. I don't know any animal health company who would refuse to provide you with early guidance. It's in our interest to do so, because, well, first of all, from a relationship building standpoint, even, we want to stay in touch and keep a finger on the pulse when it comes to startups and institutes. and we'll happily provide you with initial guidance. For example, I'm coming back to things like animal models or certain protocols. Usually you're crunched for cash, for resources. Make sure you use the things that we would be interested in seeing. It would be a pity to run a study of 6-9 months, which is expensive, and then come to us and we'd say, interesting, but this is not our benchmark, so we have no clue what we're looking at. It would have been better if you would have used this other model. So get in touch early to avoid that. If in doubt about the market opportunity of your assets, feel free to ask us questions. Questions about the target species of interest. Sometimes you have an asset which could go to, I'll make up something which is not even so fictitious, but poultry versus ornamental birds. We would be able to tell you which one is more interesting for a certain asset. Indications, same thing. We usually have a very good understanding of which indications are big and which are relatively small, which links to the market potential there, my second bullet point. The regulatory pathway, same thing. I cannot offer you regulatory consultancy. Our regulatory colleagues obviously have day jobs as well. But if it's a quick question around, hey, looking at the European landscape, would this be a product governed by EMA or by EFSA? These are things that we can relatively quickly assess, because for some products, it is indeed sometimes a question. For some products, it's really clear. This is an EMA product or an EFSA. For some, there is this gray zone in between. Also, geographies to target. I'm a poultry guy, so I'll give you a poultry example, but not every country produces turkeys. I mean, not all markets are a big turkey market. So if you have a specific turkey vaccine, target the turkey producing countries. This is a very specific example now, perhaps, but it gives you the idea. Another one. So you'll often get an answer along the lines of, will decline for now. Decline but watch is what we call it. So essentially it means, seems early to us. We may need some additional data, or maybe we didn't even make our mind up about whether we want to be in this space. So we'll decline, but we'll keep watching what you're doing. Feel free to get back to us once your data package has expanded. Often a decline but watch will come with specific guidance. For example, we'll decline for now, but once you would have your efficacy data in this species, we'd happily have a look again. So don't do not be reluctant to come back. But if you come back, make sure it's with new data. And that's linking to my don'ts when engaging. I'll get back to the new data in a second. Just going here from top to bottom. One important don't. Don't try to sell your solution as a miracle cure for everything. We see that happening every now and then. It's not very credible. If you think you're sitting on a miracle drug, perhaps you are, but then make sure you have the data to back it up. Very strong claims, ask for very strong data to back it up. Another one, don't inflate your market potential. I would even say, don't try to estimate your market potential, though that's a bit exaggerated, perhaps. It's always interesting to estimate your market potential, but some startups come to us and say, hey, I think this product could sell $400 million in poultry. And then I have to tell them, well, do you realize that the biggest poultry product today on the market is about 140 million or 150? I would need to check the recent estimates. So now you're coming to me and saying my product will sell 3 times more than the biggest product on the market today. That's not very credible again. So rely on animal health companies to do the market assessment for you. They're usually much better at this because they have better data points. This links to my previous slide. So I said if you have a decline but watch, feel free to get back. But if you get a decline, don't try to immediately get a different answer by trying to enter the company via other channels or other individuals. We see this happening a lot, and it's very annoying, I must say. We decline a certain asset, and then suddenly a week later, I get a colleague forwarding me an email saying, somebody approached me with this, would we be interested? And then the worst case I had was a company approaching 8 different individuals in Zoetis with the same thing, which was already declined 3 times. It's very detrimental to your reputation. So don't do that. We speak to each other internally. You can count on that. I know we're at time for questions, Latifa. I'm almost done.
Yes, exactly. Thank you.
Yeah. And
Sorry
then the
for
decline. No worries, no worries. And then after receiving a decline but watch, don't try again too soon. I've mentioned that before. Make sure there is additional reason for us to believe that it's good to engage. So that sums up the don'ts. And then very briefly, last slide, results in action. As I mentioned, there's not much that I can say because a lot of it is confidential, but 2 things which are out in the public, which are fairly recent, which had a very big external innovation component to them, were the acquisitions of PetMedics and Adivo, both at around the same time in the monoclonal antibody space. 2 companies where we initially had intensive research collaborations, which was in a way the perfect due diligence because we got to know these companies, how serious they were, and so on, and eventually led to a decision to acquire them. Real external innovation. They didn't have products on the market yet, and now their pipelines have been merged with ours. And with that, I've reached the end of my presentation, and I'll happily take questions if you have any.
Thank you so much, Dieter, for this well-paced presentation, let's say. Yeah, and as you mentioned, now we will open the Q&A session. As I see, we don't have any question yet. So as a reminder, please feel free to add your questions in the Q&A window on your screen, and we will go through them. If we don't have question there, so let me begin with one of my own to get the discussion started. So you have mentioned with those criteria and section and NEMA and an EFSA product. Can you please clarify what is the difference between those?
Yeah, that's a good question. And some people may indeed wonder why there's a bit of a gray zone. So EMA is the European Medicines Agency. They oversee products such as vaccines, pharmaceuticals with very clear disease claims. EFSA is the European Feed Safety Authority. And the link there with animal health is that EFSA also governs one specific category of products. And this shows my poultry hat again, but the coccidiostats and histomonostats specifically. So 2 parasitic diseases which have to be prevented, especially coccidiosis is a big one in chickens. And the coccidiostats, the products to prevent coccidiosis, are governed by EFSA. EFSA also governs things like performance-enhancing products. And sometimes, especially for startups, it is easier to get a data package showing performance enhancement than showing actual disease prevention or disease cure. And that is where I would advise to talk to an animal health company to understand what is commercially the most interesting. I wouldn't jump to a certain regulatory pathway too soon because there might be another regulatory pathway, albeit more complex, with a much bigger prize at the end, if you see what I mean. So that's where these early interactions are important.
Thank you so much for the explanation, Dieter. Actually, I have another question on the partnering events part. So I know that you explained the criteria to be selected for the speed dating pitch session, and but I would say, what do you wish, let's say, external partners would include in their first pitch to make it easier to say yes or to be accepted or selected?
So it all starts with an invitation. By the way, I should say we also actively engage and reach out to companies. That's also a big part of what we do. But if you're looking and you stumble upon Zoetis, for example, in a partnering event, it all starts with an invitation on the partnering platform. In that invitation, I would include, well, the things essentially that I had on my slide, what you want to discuss, what's your current progress or where you stand, and what you're aiming to get out of the meeting. And then based on that, well, we might ask for some additional clarification before we schedule a meeting, or we might immediately jump to scheduling a meeting, or perhaps we might decline. Depends on how it fits in our shopping list, as I called it. Then for the actual one-on-one, the 30 minutes, I'd say come prepared with a pitch deck with some high-level data, preferably nicely visualized, because there's not a lot of time, so there's no time to look at tables with numbers and so on, and have graphs, have nice visuals. Prepare yourself. Make sure that you think ahead and think what you want to emphasize. I'd say there's time maybe for 5 to 10 slides in such a 30-minute session, not more. If you have more, move it to a backup where you can maybe quickly draw something if in case of need. Always think, well, there are always a couple of things which will come up, but IP will be a big one. Think about your IP situation. That's usually something which you don't put in your invite on the partnering platform, but make sure you have some IP information with you for the actual meeting. We will always ask for patent protection, which patents, where are they valid, and so on.
I don't see yet questions coming. Let's say, yeah, there is one question. I just received it. Let's have a look on it. It's on
I
the
think I saw it. Interactions with academics
yes,
is what I
yes.
saw. Yeah.
Any shopping list, yes.
Yeah, a good question, Cedric. It doesn't differ that much from the interactions as explained with startups. The main difference I see is that an academic institution usually would come with one tech transfer officer or somebody from the tech transfer organization to an event like this. Usually, these TTOs have to represent, dozens of assets. So how shall I put this? We are we understand the fact that TTOs can never bring the same depth of detail as we would see from a startup. So usually a TTO interaction would be slightly more superficial with a clear follow-up afterwards where we say, yeah, this and this and this is something of interest to us. Let's follow up later with the professor or the researcher involved. Do you also consider products from Africa? I'd say yes. I mean, if it fits our shopping list, the list that you find on the partnering page, there is no geographic limit, I would say. It touches on a good point, though. Once you suppose you started developing your product and you're close to licensure in a certain geography, which maybe of lesser importance to us because we don't have a good commercial footprint there, just making something up, then that would mean we might still be interested in the asset, but it would probably mean that a lot of the development work might have to be repeated because, as you may know, USDA, FDA guidelines are different from European guidelines and yet again are different from other geographies. So that's something to keep in mind when something has been developed already for a certain geography. There might be some stuff that needs to be repeated.
Yeah, I saw already there are some 5-6 questions coming together. We'll try to manage to do fast, then we'll keep on time. So there is a question from Roxanne Filler. Thank you, Dieter, for your interesting presentation. IP is always a question that comes up, how to give you enough info without revealing too much.
I think, Roxanne, good to see you again, by the way, even if it's virtual. I'm assuming your question is related to the point where IP has been maybe filed, but is not public yet. I would say don't give away too much. Actually touches on a good point that I will spend maybe one additional minute on. An important consideration when interacting with especially large animal health companies is what we call cross-contamination of our internal R&D programs. So I'll explain. We may be working on a very similar asset as you're working on, and we may not want to see confidential data until a certain point, because suppose we progress with our internal program and we have seen your confidential data, well, then you might accuse us of the fact that we stole your idea. So that is something you'll hear a lot, and that's actually a very important point to emphasize also when it comes to the partnering events. We will never ask confidential data in partnering events. We will even tell you, instruct you not to show confidential data. We only want non-confidential stuff. And as you can imagine, we also don't have the opportunity to sign 40 NDAs for these speed dating sessions. So come with pitch decks containing non-confidential data. That's an important thing, and thanks, Roxanne, for clarifying that.
Yeah.
When you're a little bit further, when your IP has been granted, then of course there is no issue anymore. And usually what we will ask is for specific patent numbers, patent families, and so on. And then we can do our own digging. But if you are happy to provide them to us, then even easier, then we don't have to look for them. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Thank you, Roxanne from Animal Health Europe, for your question, and to Dieter for the response. I see John Charles has an interesting question also. Is there a predefined range of TRL for which you use external innovation? As large company, are you sometimes using external pilots producing facilities?
I could definitely answer the first one. There's no predefined range. But usually what we'd love to see is proof of concept in the target animal. By the way, we're not that used to working with the TRL levels. I know institutes do, and it's something we'll actually cover in DIA, not to put a plug in again for DIA, but generally what we see is relatively early. Like I said, developmental work is expensive, so usually it's relatively early things that we get to see. As a minimum, we like to see proof of concept in the target species. Yeah, that's what we refer to a lot. Then the second part, sometimes using external pilot producing facilities, not exactly sure what is meant there. Is it to produce vaccine or pharmaceuticals? Well, I'll try to answer a bit more general. Yes, we are used to using external networks for production, definitely. even for our commercial products on market. So I don't see a reason why that would not be the case for research and development purposes.
Yeah, and Charles has another question,
Yeah.
Dieter. What kind of intelligence or knowledge do you use to prioritize infectious diseases on which to develop products?
Yeah. Yeah, good question. That's where we heavily rely on the marketing teams. So the way it works in Zoetis is the what we call the species innovation strategies. So essentially the roadmap per species in to define what we're interested in are 90% built by the marketing teams, which where I'm sitting now for poultry. What you risk there is that you miss some of the emerging infectious diseases because marketing teams cannot be aware of what doesn't exist yet. Usually that is covered a bit differently in a more general emerging infectious disease bucket. But yeah, so marketing teams make up the lists, and the tools they use mostly is competitive intelligence, sales numbers, market research into customer needs, and the like.
Yeah. Thank you, Dieter. We are already over 1 minute over time. Thank you for all the explanation. I think that addresses the main points. Sorry for the attendees, we don't have still any time for take another question. Thank you all for your active participation and for the excellent questions. I have today's session provided valuable insights into how success your partnering and collaboration. And a warm thank you to my colleague Hannah, who is supporting us in the background and ensuring all runs well in every webinar of this session. A kind reminder, as you usually done, that the recording of the webinar will be made available and disseminated through Star IDAZ channels. So please feel free to share with your colleagues or who may benefit from today's discussion. Thank you so much. And I wish you to wrap up this webinar. Thank you, Dieter, and bye-bye. See you next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.